everybody. Raul here for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the great honor and pleasure of chatting with a bassist, an author, a physician, Glenn Parris.
Hi, everybody. How you doing?
Good, good. Glenn's beginning early on in bass had a shorter run than many people, and I'm going to allow him to tell us about this. And the biggest part of what we were going to talk about is his book, Dragon's Air, Archaeologist's Tale. But let's kind of go back to the music part and your bass story, Glenn. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. It was a time in my life when I was probably happiest. I saved up a little money, and I bought, I think like a $69 bass or $59 bass, at the local music shop. And I knew a couple of bass players in the neighborhood, and I begged them to teach me how to play bass. Mm-hmm. They said, "The kid's got a little money, I can make a couple of dollars." So they gave me some lessons once a week, after school or on the weekend or something like that. And then on the weekends when they'd actually play at different venues, I'd go and I'd watch my mentor, play. And it was cool. Frankie Carr and Paul Frawley, and I have no idea what became of these guys. But, back in the day, I thought they were really, really talented. I learned how to play by ear mostly. I learned how to play, simple things, usually R&B stuff, nothing really fancy. Love to learn how to play jazz, but, I could get maybe like a bridge, but I could never, get the runs and the changes and that kind of stuff. I just wasn't that fast, wasn't that good. You start listening to things that you could never reach. It introduced me to jazz, traditional jazz, jazz fusion, jazz rock, that kind of thing. And I really just had the best of times, in those days. And I can tell you when it was. It was from about 1972 to about 1976, 5 or 6 or so that I played. And I carried that bass with me through college and even into med school and residency. And I just seemed to play it less and less and less as the years went on. But I began collecting music. And I can tell you my tastes go from R&B to classic soul from the 60s, shag music from the 50s. I listened to some big band stuff from the 40s. I listened to some country western. I listened to rock. I listened to some of the classicals. I listened to a little bit of everything. And I always love musicians who blend some of those things in.
Even though at one point the academics became way more than being able to continue playing bass, and that continued appreciation of music, even in your writing, you use music as part of your muse and your inspiration.
I do. I really do. In almost anything I write, I think probably one thing I didn't have any musical references in, but in Dragon's Air, I talk about a place on this distant world called the Forest of Feelings. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you did any research on David Sanchez, which is one of my musical idols. His first and second album was The Forest of Feelings. And I love that album. I love the other album, Transformation, so much. I used a lot of that when I choreographed a lot of the action scenes in the book or some of the more sensitive scenes. I use softer music for. Sometimes when there's a build-up, he's really, really good at that. His musical style I would describe as orchestral in nature, really. I use that sort of as faux themes, every movie or any kind of cinematic work has got to have a setting music to it and theme music to it. So I use that in my mind a lot as I write. When I wrote my murder mysteries, Jack Wheaton, often references Boney James and Here She Comes when, the beautiful object of desire comes around the corner and sort of in slow motion in his mind, and I sort of describe that kind of an image. I really get inspired as I listen to music when I write.
It's interesting because I think many authors will have, when they have to create other worlds, other species, unknown things, there are these small little anchors in reality that many times are kind of obscure for the general public. But when you look closer, you go, oh, wait, this is based on something like that. And I remember when I read Dune, and I was like, oh, how creative, this guy, all these things, and the Freeman and all this stuff, only to learn that so much of it was based on the Middle East and the people of the desert. I'm going, well, okay, so maybe he wasn't as imaginative as I thought, but how he applied it, it was great.
Yeah, I still give him credit for that. Yeah, I recognize it as a takeoff on the Middle East and the oil crisis coming.
Yeah.
But he was prophetic in that regard, because he wrote Dune in the early '60s, published it in '65, but he wrote it in the early '60s. We didn't really get into the gas crisis until the early '70s.
Mm-hmm.
So he recognized the coming battle, and I think that it's sort of the job of science fiction writers to do exactly that, to prophesy, things to come based on what we're looking at right now.
So that said, with your book, it encompasses the timeline. And part of this is back to my life. I have an undergrad with physics. So as I'm looking into this far into space in the past and towards the future, we are just a notch on that timeline.
Yeah.
And their civilization, the characters have a much bigger, a more panoramic view, if you will, of time, whereas humanity is its tiny little blip.
I reflect that in the main character, Vitna.
Mm-hmm.
She's an archaeologist. What value could an archaeologist be to a people who have vivid, detailed memories that go back 100 million years? It's a worthless profession.
Yeah.
But when they come back, they find that there's a dark period that they don't have any records on. And she digs right into that. And it's interesting to think of ourselves as the object of an archaeologist's interest, our present being an archaeologist's project, so to speak.
Oh, I actually think that we used to chuckle because when you look at our existence, and more so the impact we're having on our surroundings, whether you look at it from a planetary scale or even on a smaller scale, and you think ahead, what is an archaeologist going to think about these things that they're seeing, and what conclusions are they going to draw? The one that always came to mind was when I would chat with plastic surgeons that were doing breast implants, that archaeologists in the future would find these skeletons with these strange orbs placed on their chest and go, we don't understand why they would do this thing. Some ritual they had, they put these things there. Who knows?
That is going to be a really interesting question in about 1,000 years.
Exactly. What were they thinking when they did this? And
I can actually hear people debating. These were placed in the chest close to the heart so they'd have water in them.
Yeah, so drawing the wrong conclusions is still scientific method. And I know that in science fiction, many times, like there was with one of the Star Treks, it was the episode where Chekhov had gone looking for nuclear vessels and had fallen on the carrier, the Enterprise, and they were going to trepanate his head to let off the pressure.
Yes.
And Bones was carrying on. What kind of barbarians would cut a hole in somebody's head to fix it? But it's not far. When we look at archaeology, the Mayans did this for patients with headaches.
Sure.
And they found skulls with very neat square holes punched in them with obsidian knives, which tells you they weren't successful. The patients didn't survive. There wasn't healing after that. I mean, it was the end of the road.
Actually, in the East, in Egypt and sometimes in Rome, there were cases of people who've had craniotomies where a piece of the skull has been removed and then placed back and then healed.
Wow.
There's evidence that this healed over. So whatever they did it for, whether it was successful or not, the patient survived the operation.
That's amazing. But I digress and I go back to your book. Here we are the subject of an archaeologist. The only challenge I had, and I'll say it would be a good project for you to sit down with an artist and make like the guidebook of the different species.
Yes. That's actually a project that I'm tackling right now.
Excellent.
I am recruiting a number of artists. There's something about the artistic mind that gets this story. And from the first iteration of the story, Eminent Domain, by J. Cameron Time, which was my pen name 25 years ago, the artists at conventions always got it.
Yeah.
They would ask questions about, what the character looked like and why they did, why they had certain traits. And as I explained why, I could see the gears going in their minds, and they got it. And I can't tell you how many artist renditions were sent to me as a young author. And it's like, does this look like it? Does this look like it? And they all had their own interpretations, which is a great thing in literature, for people to have their own interpretations. Of course, I have my movie in my head, but these artists have completely different things, but they work for them.
Yes.
They really get into it. I reconnected with an artist that I worked with over 20 years ago, and he was so excited about getting back into it. He remembered the characters. He sent me a new sketch. He says, "Yeah, I'd love to work with you again. I mean, you've got to write the sequel to that book. I've been waiting for it for years." And it gives you a warm feeling as an author. With music, lots of people listen to it, and they talk about it, and then it kind of goes viral. Books, not so much anymore. We're competing with streaming and television, and of course music and travel. So much on the internet. For people to sit quietly and read anymore is sort of a lost passion.
On the other hand, with computer generation, if you have an artist that can take a concept and now the new artists, which are your computer generating kind of people, simply look at how Star Wars has gone from when we saw it back and we didn't question it. Jabba was a puppet. There was just no ways around it. But they could CG him now and make him move around the field. And so there's so much that can be done, but it always starts from the human, your mind, to somebody who can convert it into a visual prospect, and then it goes to the next layer, the next artist, and how they're going to convert it. I think that's very exciting. And of course, this is coming from someone who is the proud, nerdy owner of the Starfleet Cadets Manual and the blueprints for the original Enterprise. And
I still have a copy of that myself.
There you go. And so I just wanted to see it. Yes.
When I began writing science fiction, I said to myself, all right, I'm a big Star Trek fan, a huge Star Trek fan. And I said, okay, if I'm going to write something, I don't want to write Star Trek. I want to write something that is clearly millions of years ahead. Now, when you do that kind of thing, if you don't have knowledge that's millions of years ahead, you kind of have to keep things very, very general and vague on how things are done. Mm-hmm. But you also want to base them in science. So there are a lot of concepts that I use, but I didn't explain how they did it. And what they did is still in the realm of known science, and it either doesn't break laws or it bends them to the breaking point.
Well, I'm hoping that people, by having heard part of this conversation, are going to be, we've wet their whistle, we've got their interest going. I want to keep them wanting more. So people, if you want to know more about what we're talking about so you can experience yourself Dragon's Air, where's the best place for people to find your book, Glenn?
The best place for them to find the book is really Amazon. They can get the book within 48 hours from Amazon. But Barnes & Nobles will also order it for you in a heartbeat, and so will Books A Million. Anywhere that you get it is fine by me. I just like the idea that the story gets out, and I hope that people enjoy it.
Gotcha. Well, we appreciate you taking time, sharing your story. People, Dragon's Air, make sure you check this out. It's a substantial read, and keep your eyes open for the player guidebook so you know what creature was which and which ones are bigger than the others.
Yeah, read the Jing Pen translator.
Yes.
The Jing Pen are what these people, the Ifalu, call human beings because they couldn't believe that we evolved to look like them. So they think that we were genetically engineered, and we're what they call toys. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So as toys, we have no rights. So if we step the wrong way, they should just eliminate us completely, or just eradicate the bunch of us. And they could do it with little more than a snap. They don't have an infinity gauntlet, but it wouldn't take much more than a snap to finish us off. So really kind of scary.
There you go. There you go. Well, again, Glenn, we appreciate you taking time. Folks, you've seen him here. Glenn Parris on Bass Musician Magazine, Dragon's Air.